people that you have no idea who they are looking at your hoo-ha. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about why I chose home births with both of my babies. So I do apologize if this gets interrupted a few times. I am in the transition of we are beginning to build our house and we are living with my sister right now. I am also keeping my other sister's kids, so you know, my life is just a little bit chaotic right now. But my baby is down for his nap, so I wanted to try to fit this video in while I had a moment where there's not a baby at least tugging on the camera. So anyways, let's start from the very beginning. So before I ever had kids, or before I even thought about having kids, shut the door. And there was interruption number one. Okay, so back to the beginning, before I ever had kids or thought about having kids, planning to have kids, my mom had me and my sisters completely, I would say naturally, but she was induced, but she did not have an epidural with all three of us. So even after being induced, she went through all of that pain without an epidural, and that just kind of stuck out to me, and that was something that I wanted to do whenever I decided to have kids, is I didn't want to have an epidural. I guess part of it was just wanting to be tough and strong and thinking that, you know, I could do that without that. But so I don't like needles, I don't like shots or anything like that, so I knew I definitely didn't want a shot in my back. So my plan was to just do it like my mom. I was going to be having my children in the hospital, and I was just going to do it all natural. I had no idea that home birth was even a option. So fast forward a little bit, Brian and I got married, and we had talked about having kids, but you know, it wasn't anything that we wanted to rush into. My best friend got pregnant with her first, and her husband at the time, his whole family had been born, most of them, through a midwife, and so that was the path that she was taking. And so once she started talking about this, I was on board big time. I was like, this is so awesome, this is so neat, this is something that I'm very interested in. And she had her baby, and she ended up using the same midwife that I ended up using, but she had her baby at the midwife's birthing house. So it was just pretty much a cabin that was really close to the midwife's actual home, and you could just rent it out for your birth time. There was a tub there, a kitchen, and then a bedroom, and you were able to stay there, I think like 24 or 48 hours after you had the baby. So that's what she chose to do. Once I realized that there was a possibility to have a home birth, I started digging in and researching as much as I could, especially when we decided that we were going to have a baby, because I was just like, this is so awesome. Like, how could you not want to have a baby at home? Especially if I had planned on doing it naturally in the hospital anyway. So the more I researched into it, the more excited I got. Here are my top reasons as to why I wanted to have a home birth. I wanted to do a unmedicated birth. So in the hospital, you are more likely to have a medicated birth just because it's available. That was not going to be available to me at home. So I didn't want to have like a moment of weakness in a hospital and end up going against something that I really did not want to do. Two, being at home, I am so much more comfortable. You know, anytime I was ever sick or not feeling well, I just wanted to be in my own home, in my own bed, and I knew bringing life into this world was not very comfortable situation. I mean, you're in pain, there's lots of blood, all that fun stuff, and I just knew that I was going to feel so much more comfortable if I was in my own home. Also, having a home birth meant that I could eat as much as I wanted to. The midwife would allow that. Shut the door. Get out here and shut the door. Interruption number 2. So I knew that I would be very, very comfortable at home, and studies show that when a woman is more comfortable and more relaxed, that their birth goes a lot easier for the most part. Also, after doing a lot of research into what epidurals actually kind of lead to, the use of Pitocin or drugs that help to start labor, that typically leads to an epidural. Pitocin leads to an epidural because they're inducing you. Your body apparently is just not ready to be having a baby just yet. And I know I'm not degrading people that choose to do this. Sometimes it is very necessary. It's safer for the mom and the baby if the mom is induced, but a lot of times it's not necessary, and it's just for the convenience of the doctor or the convenience of the mom. And I didn't want to go against nature, go against what God was like doing to my body and allowing my body to go through. So that was another reason that I wanted to be home. So Pitocin typically leads to an epidural because the contractions are typically a lot more intense or more frequently a lot faster, and you're going to have a longer labor with those super intense contractions. Now, I'm not saying that this is for everybody, but for the majority, once you're given Pitocin, that typically leads to an epidural just because it's so intense. There's no way to like build up or prepare for it. And then once you get an epidural, a lot of times that either slows down your labor or it can put stress on your heart or your baby's heart, and then that can lead to an emergency C-section. And a C-section can lead to them nicking your bladder. It could lead to scar tissue. It could lead to not being able to have kids again. Just a lot of different things. And I felt like if that from the very beginning could be avoided, then that was something that I wanted to steer clear of. And with a home birth, none of that was really an option. If I, for some reason, went super late and needed to be induced, then we would have went to a hospital, and my midwife would have coached me at a hospital instead of preparing everything at home. Also, having a home birth, I could decide who came to my house, who was there while I was giving birth. I could decide who came in and out of the room. So I watched my sister give birth to 3 of her 4 kids, and all 3 of them were in the hospital. And I knew from that experience, like, one, she didn't really have a relationship with any of the nurses. It was probably the very first time that she'd ever met them. Her doctor, even though I do feel like she had a really good doctor, it was kind of like a hit and miss. Like, if they weren't on call or if it wasn't their rotation, then you could have a completely different doctor that you've been with this entire time. And I didn't want that. So as a midwife, she is meeting with you every single meeting. At least mine was. I know that there are some different types, but my midwife met with me once a month, and she got to know me. We formed this bond, this relationship, and she was the one who was there to help me through this whole process. And she helped me deliver my baby, helped me afterwards with my baby's care, and it was just a whole beautiful process that came with this, and also that relationship. So I still have a very good relationship with her, and if we have any kids in the future, I plan on using her as our midwife again. Another thing that I didn't particularly like about watching my sister's births in the hospital was how bright the lights were, and just when it came time, because of course she had an epidural, when it came time to push, like, there's these lights overhead, and it's like legs are spread, all eye is down there, and people that you have no idea who they are looking at your hoo-ha, and I don't know. It was just very uncomfortable for me, and I wasn't even the one giving birth. So that was something that I was just like, I want the privacy of my own home. I want the comfort of my own home, and I want to choose who comes in and out of this room. So with my very first birth, it didn't really go probably exactly how I wanted it to. I wanted to have a water birth. I labored throughout the water, and that was another thing, is a water birth around where I'm at was not allowed in the hospitals. We could do it at a maternity center or at a home birth, but it was not allowed in the hospital. I think that some would provide a tub and you could like labor throughout it, but you were not allowed to actually deliver in the water. And that was my plan. I wanted to deliver my baby in the water. I didn't end up getting to do that once I went through the whole process. I did labor throughout the water, and that helped tremendously with the contractions and just calming me down, relaxing. I was honestly able to sleep, like fall asleep. I was so exhausted. I would fall asleep in between contractions, and I would only wake up when the contraction would come back, and I was working through that. I ended up getting out of the pool just because it was my very first birth. I really didn't know how hard to push, and I needed help. So my midwife, they helped me get out of the pool, and we got in my own bed. Everything was covered, so there was no way that there was going to get any like blood and stuff on my actual bed, because we had everything covered and it was all ready. But I ended up pushing my daughter out into the world in my bed, and the afterbirth I think was probably the reason why I wanted to have a second home birth with my second child. And it was just going from my bed to my bath, taking a warm bath with my baby. I was able to take the baby into an herbal bath, and she just got in there and got warm. It was a nice bonding experience for me and my baby. And then once I got out of that, I was able to put on my PJs, not something that somebody else had worn. Sorry, these kids are arguing like crazy. But it was not something else that somebody else had worn, and they had bleached it in a like generic washing machine, you know what I mean? And I was able to get back into my bed and get comfortable and just hold my baby. They didn't take my baby away from me to a nursery. All of her checkups, her measurements, her weight was done right in front of me, right there on the edge of my bed. And it was just such a more peaceful experience for me. And after that experience, even though I had a really hard time pushing her out, I still wanted to have another home birth when I got pregnant with my second one. So my second birth was a totally different experience. My midwife actually didn't even make it to our birth because he came so fast. And I do have that video linked in I'll put it in my description box, and then I'll put it in a card up here as well. You guys can watch that if you haven't seen it. But I went to the midwife that morning, and I was not progressed at all. I was 39 weeks. I was miserable chasing around an 18-month-old and just really wanted to get this baby out. And I asked her if there was anything that we could do naturally to kind of speed things up. Well, she just so happened to know how to mix up a concoction of herbs, and she told me that these herbs were not tried and true. Like sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't, but she said go ahead and take these herbs, and if they start giving you contractions, then stop. If they don't, then we'll take another dose at so many hours. Interruption number 3. Fast forward, that ended up putting me into labor, and I had, as soon as my contractions started getting rough, I think it was about a total of 2 hours from the very beginning contraction to where they were like 10 minutes apart to when I pushed my son out. And I felt like if I hadn't had that first home birth experience, then I probably would have been freaking the heck out with this one. I was in my bathtub trying to relax just a little bit, get the warm water going, thinking that it was probably going to make my contractions stop because I hadn't had anything up until then. And that didn't happen, and I ended up pushing my son out. With the second one, my body knew what to do, but also having the experience of being at home, I didn't feel the urgency to get anywhere. I was already at home. I knew that that was my plan. I was going to have the baby at home, and my body just naturally took over, and I pushed him out and pulled him to my chest, and it was just the sweetest thing. Like, that experience was even better than the first one where the midwife was actually there coaching me.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
You have to push anything else?
Not right now. Oh, baby, are you?
Let me see him. Is he crying? Does he need to cry?
He's breathing, he's fine. Oh my gosh. We held on to him, and I was able to deliver the placenta before she got there, and we had her on the phone, and she kind of walked us through on how to keep the placenta above the baby's heart, and the baby was doing fine. And again, I got to go through the whole process of just that bond, and they got to do the skin-to-skin contact, and just they were introduced to the breast like as soon as they came out, and were able to nurse, and I didn't have any breastfeeding issues. My milk supply came in. The first time with Selah, I did have a little bit of issues. She got jaundice, and we did have to go to the hospital about a week later because her levels just kept increasing, which is very common, but the baby's awake. So I'm going to kind of wrap this up. So with all of that being said, home birth for me was just such a more peaceful, comfortable experience with having my babies, and to know that they were introduced to the atmosphere of love and kindness and caring and comfort was pretty awesome to experience with them. And I still love that I have those stories too. Okay, so it's actually a few hours later, and as I was thinking about getting ready to edit this video, I realized that because the kids were in and out of the house, I was having a hard time trying to think, and there was a few things that I still wanted to mention as to why I am happy that I chose home births. So let's continue this just a little bit. One of the things that I really liked about having home birth was my midwife was very honest with me and left all the decision making up to me. I mean, of course, if it came down to like a life or death situation, she would take over, and she would have done her medical duty to save me or the baby had it come to that. But as far as testing and drugs, antibiotics, things like that, the options were given. Vaccinations, the options were given. It kind of made things a little bit more difficult because whenever you're in the hospital, like, you don't really have an option. It's just, it's done, and there's no option for that. But when you have a home birth, at least in my experience, she let me know what each thing was for, and what the risks versus rewards were. She told me to do my own research, and I was the one who had to make that decision for me and my baby and my family. So for instance, one of the things that in Tennessee is required is the antibiotic ointment that they put on your baby's eyes. I honestly didn't even know why they did that, and most mothers didn't, especially even ones that have had babies before. I had no idea what that was for. So that antibiotic ointment was created in, I think it was the 60s or 70s. A lot of men had gone off to Vietnam to fight, and when they were there, they were not faithful to their spouse, and they brought back some STDs and did not tell their wives. So they got gonorrhea, and when they had the baby, it was causing blindness. So in order to protect these men from their infidelities and keep everybody's secrets, they just mandated that, especially, I know that it's a law in Tennessee that if you have a baby in a hospital, you have to have that antibiotic. I'm not like against antibiotics. I just feel like putting antibiotics onto a baby when they are first born, like unnecessarily, it just doesn't need to be done. So especially if I didn't have an STD, which I did not. So that was something that I opted not to give my child. Another thing is the vitamin K shot, which is I guess a vaccine of some sort. But most mothers have no idea that they're even giving that to their child. And we did opt to do the vitamin K shot, but vitamin K was to help the baby's blood to clot a lot faster. Babies don't do that until about day 8. They don't really have that blood clotting mechanism, so the vitamin K shot actually helps to do that. So we ended up, after like weighing the pros and cons for that, we did end up deciding to go with the vitamin K. Some mothers decide not to, and more power to them, but they're at least given the choice. And that's what I really liked about having home birth, is that I was given a choice. Okay, so another thing that I thought of was being able to give birth in any position that I wanted. I know they're being a little bit more lenient, I think, in hospitals now, where you're able to like get up and move around and things like that. But when I was pregnant, there was, in my area, that was kind of frowned upon. Like, you needed to be in bed, you needed to, I don't know, people just, if you decided not to have an epidural, then it just seemed to be kind of like, you're crazy, like you don't have to prove anything to us. And it's not that I was trying to prove anything to anybody. I just felt like it was what was best for me and my baby. But so when you have an epidural, it's kind of hard to get up and move or change positions. And like I said, now it's even different then, because I think they can do like a half epidural or something like that. But I did not want to have an epidural, and I wanted to be able to birth in the position that I wanted to. So I didn't really know what that would look like, especially with my first birth. I kept pushing. I was on my knees, like hanging over the pool, but I ended up delivering on my side in bed. And then with my son, I was able to be on my knees and deliver him. Like, I got to reach down and pick him up and deliver him myself. So with both of those, I got to choose what position I felt like was best for me and for the baby, and I really enjoyed that. Okay, so I think that that is the very last thing that I can think of. I am going to go ahead and end this video here. I hope that maybe if you're kind of like on the edge, not really sure if you're going to do hospital or in home, that this kind of gives you a little bit more material to judge whether you want to do that or not. I am pro home birth as much as possible. I think that women are capable of doing things that we've kind of have had the liberty taken away from us by society, and I feel like honestly having a home birth was kind of empowering, and it just almost like that survival mode, like, you know, if all of the hospitals shut down, like, I could do this. Like, it's not rocket science. I don't know, God just gives us that natural ability. Now, I do understand that some people just don't have that luxury, that we have health issues, or a baby's life may be in danger, and I do feel like, you know, you need to go through the screenings and make sure that you're talking with your midwife. Your midwife is certified and has really good experience, and somebody that you trust to let you know if something's, you know, up or not. So I trusted her to tell me the truth. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Don't forget to hit the subscribe channel for more holistic living, minimalism, and motherhood. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.